Okay, looks like we are live. I'm in Kelowna right now, and trying to shoot this video from the deck that overlooks, or the patio, I guess, that overlooks the Okanagan. You can kind of see the boats in behind me. The sun is coming in, so it's a beautiful day. Unfortunately, it's kind of washing out my face, so I'm trying to hide a little bit behind this shade so that it doesn't look too crazy. But I think today's show is going to be really good. Really, what I want to talk about is, I'll back up a second. I was actually on a run through Calamar Park, which is just basically right out my front door here. And I was listening to a podcast with Tim Ferriss, and he was interviewing, I might get the guy's name wrong, Josh Waitskin. And he's like a 8-time world chess champion and Brazilian black belt in jiu-jitsu. And what they were talking about was how to become world class at your art. And I thought that was quite interesting because for me, I've I guess I've kind of invested, that's funny. I've put in 15 years into investing in commercial real estate, in real estate, about 10 of those years specifically in commercial real estate. And over that time, what I came up with, and this was also discussed between Josh and Tim on his podcast, was coming up with like your principles and how you make decisions. That's really what it came down to. And I thought that it would be valuable to share kind of my what I call Shane's 8 non-negotiables to investing in commercial real estate. And it's interesting because it's literally one page like that. And when I show it to people, I think the initial reaction is, oh, like, that's nice. It's one page, but I don't think that they understand or appreciate how much energy and effort went into creating that one pager. Because what I try to do when I'm investing is come up with frameworks and so that I'm able to kind of make decisions a lot quicker. Because what you'll notice is, and since I launched the podcast and wrote my 2 books, I'm getting way more opportunities. And so if I didn't have kind of my 8 non-negotiables or my, my 10 investing religions on how I invest in commercial real estate, then it would be very easy to get overwhelmed and bogged down by opportunities. And what that means is when the right opportunity comes by, I could easily miss it. And so what I want to do today is share with you a few of those 8 non-negotiables, but I'm going to go deep on one of them. And, I'll give you an opportunity at the end of this podcast to be able to download my 8 non-negotiables. But just to kind of rattle off a few quick ones here, is the property big enough? Does it have the right debt? Do I control it? Is it functional? Can I buy it below replacement value? I mean, those are just a couple of my non-negotiables. And the value is in understanding a little bit deeper. And if it's of interest, what I'll do is I'll actually, I can create videos like this or podcast shows on each one specifically if there's enough interest. But today, the one I wanted to focus on is really investing in what you understand. Because in my opinion, and I believe I read this from Warren Buffett, and that is risk comes from not understanding. And so when people ask me about Bitcoin or the stock market or how to invest in options, I have no opinion because quite frankly, I don't spend any time or energy on it. I'm very interested in it, and it's quite possible that I'll have some people on my podcast to interview that will discuss those because I'm open-minded. But the truth is, it's not my area of specialty, and so I obviously have opinions on it, but I'm certainly not going to advise anyone as to what they should do as it relates to any of those topics. But as it relates to commercial real estate, I focus on commercial real estate because A, I understand it, I can control it, I can influence the outcome, and what I really like, and that's kind of the tagline, my arbitrage architect, is that I'm able to add value and force appreciation by finding opportunities that others don't see because I've got an investing advantage over them. I've got relationships, I've got contacts, and we're going to get deeper into that into today's show as well. So, last week I talked in depth on how to find the right deal. And in terms of finding the right deal, which is kind of step one in investing in real estate, in commercial real estate, there's kind of three sections that fall underneath invest in terms of finding the right deal. The first one we talked about was location. Today, I want to talk about the actual property itself. And inside, I try to group things into three because I feel that it's easier to understand and remember, frankly. So I've kind of said, okay, so if you're trying to find a deal, there's three areas underneath it. We talked about location. Today we're going to talk about property. And underneath property, there's three areas that I like to focus on. Number one, is it functional? Meaning, is there enough parking? Is the layout proper? Does it have the right ceiling height? Like in terms of, think of walking into an apartment building with 7-foot ceilings. I mean, that right there is not very functional. You walk into a new one and they've got 9-foot ceilings, and that's really what people are looking for. So that's what I mean by functional. Secondly is title and legal. I don't want to get too deep into that, but frankly, any lawyer, and in most cases, you can pull the title on the property, and that's really what's registered on title. What kind of debt is there? Any easements? Easements meaning restrictions or covenants. I could probably go into a whole show on title, and in reality, I'm probably not the best person. A lawyer would likely be the best person to go through that. However, what I'm looking for on title is what's going to hurt me on this property that's registered, what is going to come off that title, and what's going to stay on the title when I purchase it. And that's a very important conversation to have with your lawyer. Frankly, it's one that I have probably even before I write an offer on a property. And the one today that I want to focus on is understanding who the tenants are in your property. And really what I mean by that is, what is the demand for the commercial property that you're investing in? And when you understand where the demand is coming from your tenants, then in my opinion, it's much easier to understand the value of that property. So, okay, it looks like it's working, this video, because I'm getting some thumbs up here, which is cool. So really, I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people start with investing in apartment buildings, because it's the easiest, frankly, to understand. I mean, everyone needs a place to live. That's the argument. And so if a new investor to commercial real estate starts looking and says, well, I don't really understand retail tenants or industrial or office or self-storage, but I understand apartment buildings. And I get that. But it's also one of the reasons why I feel that market is so saturated today. It's not to say that I'm not looking at apartment buildings. I still do, because I feel that long term, that's probably one of the best asset classes to be in. But I don't want to be pigeonholed into one asset class, which is why I really like retail. I love industrial, and there's a few other asset classes that I look at as well, maybe mobile home parks, for example. But the concept that I want you to take away from is understanding the demand and not just going after one asset class, say multifamily, because it's the easiest. Just because it's the easiest does not necessarily mean it's the best asset class to be in. And I can tell you that in 2019, and probably for the past 4 years, it has been the asset class that most investors and big money is chasing right now. So for me, I like to be a little contrarian, and I know retail, for example, is not very popular because, quite frankly, what's going on in e-commerce and online is definitely impacting how people buy. And so that's just an extra element of risk. However, if you are able to mitigate that risk and go after the right tenants, then there's a tremendous opportunity. So I'm not going to get into that today because I really want to stay focused on understanding the market. And it actually reminds me of a conversation that I had with a gentleman. I won't say who he is because quite often when I do these episodes, I haven't asked permission from people, so I want to respect their privacy. But I can certainly talk about it in generalities. And so in this particular conversation, this is a gentleman who's invested with me in previous deals, and he was reconnecting just to find out about what else I had on the go. And I asked him what he was up to. And it was interesting because he had just closed on a single family house. And I asked him, because I'm always curious, I said, like, tell me about the deal. Like, like, how'd you find it? What was it? He's like, it was a fixer-upper. It was about 5 minutes from my house. I understood the market. Let's just say that in this particular market, houses sell for over $350. This house came on the market for $250. He called up the agent, and I think he said he had it under contract, or he closed on it all cash within a day. And he said it's just because he knew the market so well. Remember, like, that really goes back to the last episode, which is finding the location, understanding it, close proximity, unfair advantage. And he went after that property like hard. He fixed it up and he understood. Now, he had options. He could have tore that house down and put 2 infills, or he could have renovated it and basically put in, like, gutted it and put in, a real impressive renovation. However, because he understood the demand of who the tenants were there, and he also understood the market on a whole, and he said that he talked to a few different builders, and he said, you know what? One of the builders gave him very good advice. He said there's about 1,000 infills right now here in Edmonton, and he advised against it, even though this builder would have done very well. He probably would have made $150,000 for getting the actual work. But because he was good friends with this gentleman, and that goes to relationships, which we're going to talk about as well, when you have those kind of tight relationships, you understand the demand, you understand the location, you're able to kind of take that risk out of the deal. Now, this particular friend of mine, he did well on the deal, but he says, you know what, Shane, it's a hell of a lot of work. I made some money, but frankly, it's tough to scale. And those kind of opportunities, they come up like once every couple of years. So sure, let's say he made $50,000. Like 50 grand is nice, but the truth is he's not going to quit work. We're making 50G. And if you can only find one of those every, 6 to 12 months, you might be able to replace your income. But I don't know too many people that want to roll the dice, especially if the people most of the people I work with are making kind of mid 6 figures. They're not going to leave their job to do one deal and hope that they can find the next one. And so we started to talk about commercial real estate because he was very happy with the investment in the Muskoka deal, the 1,150 acres that we did out in Ontario. And he wanted to talk about more opportunities like that. So I said, okay, well, tell me about, where you're living, what you're interested in. And the conversation kind of transitioned into industrial. And without getting into the specifics, because he's in oil and gas, he has a very good understanding of industrial buildings, locations, and tenants. And so I said, well, look, if you've got the relationships and you understand the demand for those uses in your market, then I said, if you're interested, I can help you put some of the other pieces together. I said, because here's, and I think I was pretty clear on this on the earlier shows that I've done. If you're able to find the deal and control it, and this is really talked about in more detail in my book, Club Syndication, but if you can find the deal and control it, that doesn't mean you have to buy it. Control it means you have it under contract. Then I explained to this gentleman that you're able to really dictate the terms of that deal, and you can now become part of the general partnership. You can start to become part of the ownership, even if we need to go outside and raise the money. And so this week we're going to have a follow-up call, and I'm really going to get into the specifics of who he should be focused on. And a few of those are going to be, who are your personal connections in the area? What leasing agents, so who are the commercial real estate professionals that are leasing space to end users, tenants? And then who are the owners? And so if you've got, if you can start to kind of create that list, and you can do the same thing in your market, doesn't have to be industrial, could be retail, could be apartment buildings, really doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, you want to start talking and getting to be an expert in your market area. So you've found the location. Now we're talking about finding the exact property that you're going to start to invest in. And like I said, it really comes down to demand. And so, kind of a quick story, the industrial development that I did in Calgary up by the airport, I frankly, I understood industrial, so I understood the asset class and the demand. However, what I didn't understand was this very specific market in Calgary. So what I did, and this is a lot more advanced, I understand that, but I think it goes to illustrate the point, which is understanding the demand of the market. We put 2.9 acres of industrial land under contract, and then my partner and I, we went out and spent, I don't know, say about $10,000, which is not an insignificant amount of money, but when you look at the payoff, so risk versus reward, very asymmetrical. Like, we had tremendous upside with very little downside from our perspective. So we got 4 months, because I felt that 4 months was going to be enough time to put our plan together and go to the market and test and make sure that these 1,250 to 1,500 square foot industrial bays, so an industrial bay, think of it like it would be about 30 feet wide by about 55 feet deep, plus or minus. There'd be an overhead door in the back, and a lot of the users were going to use them for office as well as industrial, so kind of showroom office, because they were big enough that you could have office at the front, you could have storage at the back, and they were tall enough that you could have a second floor of office as well. So we felt that this was a product that people would want. However, because of how small they had to be and how much parking we needed, it was really going to be a far more expensive industrial product than most people were going to be used to. And so I needed to make sure that the demand was going to be there. So in my mind, we knew what our go, no-go was, and I want to say it was around 65% pre-sales. And our agents did a tremendous job. Even though I have a commercial real estate license, and I did at the time, I wasn't the best person to sell that. And so I had to kind of get my ego out of it and realize that even though there was a lot of money on the table, for my investors and for myself, what was most important was to get the product that I needed. And so we brought in the best guys that we could. They did a tremendous job. And at the end of the day, it worked out very well. So, but I needed to verify. So the agents told me there was demand, and I trusted, but I verified. I made sure that, and not just with offers, because I needed hard money on the table, meaning anywhere from 6 to 11% down. So if, let's say, one of these industrial condos was $500,000, they weren't, but they're a little bit less, but just for easy math, if someone had 10% down, they had $50,000. Not many people or businesses are going to walk away from $50,000. Some might, but I felt comfortable that that was enough money to test the demand for the market. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting story to explain and illustrate how to verify demand. So the next time that I speak to this gentleman in Edmonton, because that's kind of where he's from and that's where he has the relationships, we're going to talk about how we can get kind of that unfair investing advantage, so that if he comes across a tenant, a property, or a broker that has a property that makes sense, and we start to match off. So let's say he comes across a business that needs 10,000 square feet, and he knows that this business is going to pay $10 a square foot. So 10,000 square feet times $10 a square foot, that's going to be $100,000 a year. And we know over here that there's an agent that says, hey, I've got a building that is 10,000 square feet for $1 million. We can say, okay, you know what? If we buy the building and we put this tenant in, we're going to get 10% return on our money, right? $1 million property, $100,000 of revenue coming from this one tenant, 100,000 divided by $1 million, 10%. That's simple. It's probably not going to work out quite like that, but if I started to use $11.25 and 14,000. Like I can't do the math on video, so I try to keep it as kind of high level and easy as possible. But you get the principle of finding the tenant and finding the building, and that really comes down to the key relationships with the owners, the commercial brokers, and the business owners in those. I don't know if I said that twice. Yeah, the owners. So the owners of the actual properties, the business owners or tenants, the users, and then the commercial real estate agents. So I'm just going to do a quick recap, and we're going to finish up for today. So because I want to get out for a quick run here before my kids wake up. So recap property. When you're finding a property, do you understand the tenant's needs? Number two, is there a gap in the marketplace? I didn't really get into this in detail, but I think you can understand that if there's a gap, meaning there is unmet demand, we talked about that with my industrial condos, then you're able to exploit that gap and make money. And then number three, it's really relationships and connections. And that was also, I talked about that with the industrial development that I did, where the connections that our brokers had with the end users is really what made that deal so successful. So not easy to do, but and that's one of the reasons I didn't even have this on today's agenda. But that's one of the reasons that I don't grind commercial real estate agents. And when I say grind them, what I mean is I don't beat them up on fees, because these guys work their asses off, and there's a tremendous amount of risk that goes into being a broker, because they only get paid on the success of a deal. And so if they're not successful, these guys could have put in 4 months, got a ton of pre-sales, and we walked away from the deal. Now, A, they're probably not going to do business with me again, but they've sunk 4 months of their life working hard to get nothing. And so that is one of the reasons for new investors why it's so difficult. Because if you don't have that reputation for buying and closing properties, agents are going to take you less seriously. Now, we're not going to get into that today. Maybe in a future video, we'll talk more about that. But just understand that if a person is only paid and compensated when you close on a deal, that is just a really important piece. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to do a bad deal, because some deals that agents bring you are not meant to be done. So I never feel bad if I have to walk away from a deal. But that's why I have my 8 non-negotiables. That's why I have my investing religion, because I don't get into many deals at all that I don't close. So just keep that in mind, because your reputation will follow you in commercial real estate because of the relationships and the connections and the small network of people. It's a tiny group, so you really want to protect your reputation as an investor. So if you want to get a copy of my 8 non-negotiables, it's included in what I call my commercial real estate scorecard. And it's about a 5-page document. I mean, this thing has cost me a significant amount of money to put together, just from the graphics. And I didn't need the graphics, but I know that some people will appreciate that. So I invested the money, hired a designer to help me with my mind map, with the cover, with outlining it and formatting it and making it look extremely professional. And inside that, you're going to get my 8 non-negotiables, but you're also going to get how to find properties. I mean, literally, this is stuff that I have probably invested like well over 100 hours, and probably read 15 to 20 commercial real estate investing books to put together. So you can get that. All you got to do is go to clubsyndication.com, put in your name and email, and I'll send it out to you directly. So that's it for today's show. Hope you enjoyed it. Any questions, by all means, flip them out to me, and I'll look forward to next week. Bye for now.